Hello and welcome to part three of Decode Your Cycle. Before I get into this, I mean, you will see it anyway, I guess, but I might put this into two parts just to make sure that it's not too lengthy. I know that the brain can start to switch off after a certain amount of time, so I might just break it up, but we'll see how it goes as I'm chatting my way through this one. So if I do get to a point, um, and say we'll jump onto another call, then that is what we will do. But I am so thrilled that you are here today to bring this three-part workshop to a close. Obviously, we've journeyed all the way through understanding your shadow self, the subtle nuances of energy alignment, and today we're going to be focusing that energy into the tangible and the foundational intelligence of the physical body. So we're going to be focusing on what might seem really simple, but it is the most profound impact of consistent nutrition and movement that can have a profound impact on not just your cycle, but your overall vitality. I've said this so many times, but I'm really going to say it again. What I really want you to remember is that your cycle is a compass, not a curse. I might not have said that exact phrase, but your cycle is a compass, it is an indicator. So, whilst we are using the cycle as like the healing point, it is going to have a ripple effect on so many systems inside of your body. That being, like we've spoken about, the unconscious thought patterns and beliefs, the energy body, and the things that are going on within the physical body. There's so much happening inside of the physical body at any one time. And on nutrition and movement practices do truly really impact what is happening within inside our physical system. So, as we dive into this, I would like you to really approach this session with self compassion, no judgment. We are so often bombarded with conflicting information about diet and exercise, which can lead to this feeling of sort of inadequacy or pressure. It is one of the reasons why I spoke about the shadow part first, because I just don't want you to do that thing where you start like shaming yourself or two things. One might be like you start just notice the dialogue that starts to come up as we talk about the things. You might be like, this is so simple, I already know this, or I already do this. Or you might also be thinking, oh my God, this is another thing that I need to do. Like all of those things are the shadow, which are just stopping you from actually integrating the information that you need in order to start to help and develop. Something that I am super focused on in all of my work is building your foundations and stripping it back to the basics. Now, only you will truly know like where you are in your journey. And I think we always just have to get honest about ourselves about where we are. Foundations always need refinement and always need building upon. I teach it in my Pilates practice. I focus on it in the gym. I focus on it in my nutrition. I focus on it in my business. Right now I'm rebuilding like my whole business and I'm making sure that the foundations are super solid. So what your foundations are is then what you can build upon. So this is not about striving for perfection or adhering to rigid rules, but it's also about really being honest with yourself about things that are impacting you that are not feeling good and where you might just slightly be leaning more into like shadow and ease and self-sabotage over leaning into like what is truly best for me. So it's about connecting with your body's innate wisdom and providing it with the fundamental nourishment and supportive movement that it truly craves. I hadn't planned to include this in, but one of the concepts that I truly really speak about inside of my world, any of the girls that are already in my world will see this, but I speak about imagine sort of treating yourself as a child. And you could relate this to inner child work, but if you treated yourself like a 3, 4, 5 year old, not literally, but if you just imagine that you are a 3, 4, 5 year old, and if you are feeding them in the way that you are feeding yourself right now, would that be considered as neglect? Would it be considered as abuse? If you were speaking to them in the way that you're speaking to yourself right now, would that be considered as neglect? Would that be considered as abuse? And if you were the movement that they were doing in their body, would it be considered as neglect? Would it be considered as abuse? And it's really about looking at that and that, as I move into what I'm about to move into, which is something that I think is super important to highlight about the concept of listening to your body. And what does that truly mean? And more importantly, what is it not? So, listening to your body, obviously, the movement and the time of listening to your body. I'm going to assume, not everyone, but I'm going to assume that many of you watching this are sort of my era, and we grew up in a time of skinny being in. Obviously, skinny's coming a little bit back in anyway. But skinny was the thing, anorexia was literally advertised everywhere. Obviously, we live in a different time now. If you're a little bit younger, you might be in a different sort of era, but there's a different sort of body positivity, but you still had to deal with certain things. But the reason for this is we all grow up with something, some sort of ideal of a body, and usually try to sort of succumb to that. And then as we move into different phases of our life, maybe getting a little bit older, maybe like having children, maybe like recognizing that some of the practices that you've been doing have not necessarily been super good for your body, or your mindset or your approach to looking after yourself probably wasn't about looking after yourself. It was trying to achieve a certain ideal in the body. So then what we've had is like the movement of like intuitive eating and listening to your body, which is great in many ways, but also incredibly detrimental in many ways. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. So, listening to your body is about acknowledging the sensations of hunger, thirst, energy, fatigue, discomfort, and ease. Obviously, many, many moons ago, we would have understood these innate experiences a lot more. It's about recognizing the need for rest when your body is craving movement and building a compassionate but honest dialogue with your inner wisdom and allowing it to guide your choices towards greater well-being. Some of you might remember a little while ago, I did a whole movement on Instagram called The Path of Most Resistance. And I'm not going to get into this too much here, but again, it was linked into a little bit shadow work. Now, sometimes listening to your body is not going to be the most comfortable thing that you need to do. So, for example, there was a time in my life where I lost a lot of weight. I'd gone through quite a traumatic thing. It's about 4 years ago now, and I lost a lot of weight. And listening to my body was that I wasn't hungry and I didn't want to eat. But actually, listening to my body is I needed to eat. And when I started to make sure that I did eat, even when I didn't want to, I started to develop an appetite again, build back things up, etc., etc., etc. So that's just an example. Another thing could be a reverse of that, of listening to your body and feeling that you need to eat X, Y, and Z when actually your body is craving a certain nutrient or thing. So, what listening to your body is not is an example like what I've just told you now. It is not giving in to every impulse without discernment. For example, we have this time, this era now where we sort of, and everyone does it, you will feel it happen to yourself all the time. But like if you skip the gym, if you don't go for a run, if you don't go for a walk, if you um, eat, you know, a load of shit food, um, it's like it's okay. You must have needed it. Blah 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 blah. I was just listening to my body, like I was going to go to the gym, but I was so tired, etc., etc., etc. When whilst that can be true, most definitely, and I talk about this a lot in my world of the concept of something I call the boy who cried wolf theory. So the boy who cried wolf theory is based upon your if you are repetitively doing these things, am I telling you not to eat chocolate, not to ever skip the gym, not to ever the like, absolutely not. But when we are repetitively doing these things, like every single night, getting home, falling into the same sequence, I must have needed it. I must have needed it. I'm just listening to my body. My body's just so tired. It's like if your body is telling you repetitively that it's exhausted and that it needs sugar, there's something deeper to be looked at other than like I need to skip exercise and eat sugar. While that might be a very small momentary solution, it's something that needs to be looked at on a deeper level. Same as like skipping exercise when we just don't feel like it, when we know that a deeper part of us knows that movement would be beneficial. So again, it's the boy who cried wolf concept. Am I telling you to never ever skip movement and never ever rest? I'm in a phase in my life, to be honest, right now where I'm really, really focusing on to rest. Like that is my main focus. But I'm still exercising every day, and um, we lose the understanding of that okay, if I'm in a season of resting, then I'm not exercising. But it's actually that in the in-between moments of my life, I'm taking deeper breaths, I'm on my phone less, I'm watching TV less, I'm choosing to read, I'm putting a meditation on, I'm spending some time, on like some facial massage, I'm spending a little bit more attention to myself in the shower. So these sort of things, like when we're saying like I just need rest, I'm just listening to my body, when actually repetitively these things are going to cause end consequences. So in the previous session, in the first session, we spoke about the shadow self. Just give a little bit more brightness. And this is really crucial here because, in my experience, when we misinterpret the body's signals, when we give into cravings or non cravings that don't truly serve us, consistently neglect movement that we know that we need, it is often unaddressed shadow aspects or our unconscious patterns, unaligned energy speaking louder than our true body's wisdom. So we can think we are listening to the intuition when in fact we are listening to the shadow and the ego. So the work we've already done is precisely why we're approaching the physical body from this integrated perspective. So you have the tools to discern whether a need is truly coming from your body's intelligence or from a conditioned habit, emotional void, or a disempowering belief system. So, understanding the nuanced art of listening to your body, we can apply this discernment to the fundamental building blocks of physical well being. So, there's so much information out there in the world right now, and it's really great. I'm not against it. And I think you have to understand like where you're sort of up to on your personal journey. So we can complicate things with like advanced diets, supplements, complex fitness regimes. When we don't really have the solid foundation, it's the thing again, something that I'm super passionate about, the concept of instant gratification. Like get this supplement, it's going to heal everything. Try this one specific thing, like it's going to heal everything. And it's like, while those things may help and support, we really need like the foundations of proper nutrition as well. And I'm not saying never take a supplement. I'm not saying never introduce different things, but let's have a look at those foundations first before we start building brick by brick. So with that, think of it like building a house. You wouldn't start decorating the interior or installing appliances before the foundation is strong, the walls are sturdy, and the roof is secure. Similarly, our bodies, when the basics are consistently met, trying to optimize or fix symptoms without first addressing the fundamentals is like trying to carry paint over a weak foundation. It might look better in the moment, but the underlying issues will persist. So, my approach to physical health and the menstrual cycle is really rooted in simplicity, consistency, and tuning into your body's unique needs. Am I going to gaslight you and do that thing and be like, well, if you just sleep enough and if you just eat this, everything will go away? No. That is why I've spoke about the shadow and the energy first, because so many other things can be impacting you that are then impacting the way in which you're showing up in your diet, your sleep, and your movement. So, you can filter the way through that way rather than taking the angle of the food and then consistently meeting with your shadow or consistently meeting with something that's going on in the energy body that is interrupting that. So, you don't need complicated diets or punishing workout routines to feel better. I work as well as a coach as a Pilates instructor. And Something that I see quite a lot, not always, but quite a lot, is that people are doing too much, to be honest. Like they're constantly sort of like punishing themselves with the things that they are doing. So for example, maybe like this is the most common cycle that I see, and see if you see yourself in this. Trying to lose weight. So restricting calories. Because of the restriction of calories, then binging either at night or at the weekend. Because of the binge, feeling super guilty, and then going back into that cycle again. People never believe me, and this is a generalized, sweeping statement. But if I had to write down the one main core issue that I see with most women, it is that they're not eating enough in the daytime, like in the actual day, not getting enough sustained calories. And so at some point, that results in a binge, in seeking something out, such as like a chocolate bar, like a can of Coke, caffeine, whatever it may be, because the body needs some kind of fuel to run on and function. So you, they've gone off my notes, sorry. So profound shifts can come from applying foundational principles, such as making sure you're eating enough calories, making sure that your general day to day movement is enough, that you're getting up and walking around enough, that you're getting, X amount of steps in a day. Do I think that it needs to be a set exact amount of steps? Not necessarily. Do I think that a good half hour to 45 minutes of walking is going to be good for you? Most definitely. So, our daily choices around food build the building blocks and energetic flow that can either soothe common cycle symptoms or make them worse. When we empower our bodies with what they need, we enable them to move towards greater balance, resilience, and ease. It will impact so many other areas of your life. So, what are the foundations? Number one, making sure that you're eating enough calories. To find out how many calories you need to be eating, you can go onto a calorie calculator and it will tell you. You just need to usually type in what you weigh, how tall you are, and from there, see the number of calories that you're going to be eating. What I personally would recommend, because I know what most women will do, is have a look at what that calorie intake is and then chop 500 calories off it. I would recommend sticking to what your recommended calories are for around about 4 weeks. And then if you are somebody who is wanting to lose weight or gain weight, then thinking about a reduction in those calories or upping your movement more. So that would also reduce in a reduction. So most people, it really still probably aim to eat about 1,200 calories. I eat close to 2,000 calories a day. And it's hard to get that amount of food, to be honest. So yeah, that would be number one. Number two, hydration is absolutely key. It is so, so important. Water plays a role in every single bodily process, including hormone detoxification, nutrition, absorption, and cellular function. Aim for a lot of water and filtered water at that. I'm not a fan of tap water. I'm not going to go into it here, but I would definitely be at least filtering your tap water and making sure that you're drinking enough water to be the first thing that you drink when you wake up, and water to be the main consistent hydration that you're having. Um, Next is prioritizing foods in their natural state. So, as much whole foods as you can get. I know that it's not always possible. I'm not saying that you need to go crazy and every single thing that you eat is whole foods, but mostly focusing on to whole foods. Your breakfast, personally, I would focus onto fats and proteins over like sugary based things. And personally, I would definitely recommend that you're eating within at least an hour or two of waking up, not waiting until like 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, etc., etc. I would eat. Maybe not immediately if you don't feel like eating immediately, but I would definitely try to eat before having any caffeine and within the first hour or two waking up. Um, your food plate, I laugh, because people would consider me a little bit anti-establishment and not really ever taking the government's advice or anything. But if you see that plate, if you type in like the NHS advised plate, make your plate look that way, you know, certain amount of carbohydrates, certain amount of protein, certain amount of fat, and um, fat, protein, carbs, and a certain amount of fiber. The I personally, in my diet, focus on two fats and proteins over carbohydrates. I'm not a no carb person, but I would rather my meal was heavier in protein and fats than it was in carbohydrates. I still eat carbs, I eat carbohydrates every single day. I just don't really eat refined carbohydrates. Again, not never. Sometimes I might eat a croissant. That is fine. Am I going to eat a croissant every single day? Absolutely not. Am I going to eat a croissant for breakfast? Absolutely not. My breakfast usually looks like something eggs, avocado, things like that, pretty much every single day. When I'm closer to my cycle, when I'm on my cycle, I usually do eat something that's a bit easier on digestion. It's more of a natural innate craving, where I may have something like oats with like peanut butter, because it's just sort of easier to eat and feels quite comforting. And that's usually like the first 2 days of my cycle. But again, that's because I have quite a deep connection with my body. Um, and I can sort of feel into what is sort of being craved for there. So, balanced plates, a combination of protein, fats, complex carbohydrates at every meal. This will help to stabilize blood sugar, which is crucial for hormonal balance. Uh, Mindful eating, so chewing your food properly, eating slowly, and getting 3 meals a day. So personally, and I have studied this a little too. I didn't put my disclaimer in earlier that I'm not a nutritionist, but I've journeyed through many different styles of eating. Personally, I would try to stay away from snacking too much, unless, of course, like you are training. So maybe you're going into the gym, you're having something before the gym, after the gym kind of thing. But sort of grazing and snacking all throughout the day is not going to do very good for your blood sugar, which is then, in consequence, not going to do very well for your hormones. Moving your body daily. This doesn't mean that you have to go to the gym every single day. This doesn't mean that you have to do Pilates every single day, but making sure that you are doing something to move your body. Only you know where you're up to on your movement journey. So going for a walk and some light stretching for you right now might be enough. For someone like myself, like that would be me sort of lying to myself if I was like, I'm just going to do some light stretching and a half-hour walk. Whereas if you're hardly moving at all right now, that's going to be great for you. So it's just about really auditing the way in which you're moving. Uh, Cycle syncing your movement. This is going to be important to just really tune in to what is happening. It's going to be quite individualized to you. If you've got something going on with your cycle and you'd rather just book in a little one-to-one and we can talk about what that might look like. I used to be quite adamant that there should be a very particular way that we should move in the different phases of the cycle. But now I've begun to learn that it really is just going to depend on what is going on for you, how you've been eating, etc., etc. I do change up the way in which I train in different phases, but it's not super radical. Again, it's really more about like feeling into what is coming up for me. So on my most recent bleed, for example, I just did like some light stretching and a little bit of a walk on day 1 and 2. I'm now on day 3, and I'm going to be going to the gym today because I feel that is okay for me. I'm not over pushing myself, etc., etc. So, what is important to note is that you may feel weaker at different points. So, not being too like super hard on yourself in terms of like, oh my God, I was able to do that week, but I'm not this week. but also not just totally abandoning like any form of movement. Finally, super prioritizing rest and recovery. So while movement is essential, so is adequate rest and recovery. So making sure you're getting enough sleep at night, making sure you're just having moments where you're focusing on to relaxing your nervous system in moments in between, just throughout your day. I'm going to wrap that up there for now, and then I'm going to create another video where I'll address some more common symptoms. But I really want you to, just as a consequence of what we've spoken about today, have a little think about your nutrition, your movement, and almost do like a self audit. This is how I do everything in my world. So, a self audit, have a little view, maybe through like the past week. Like, how's your walking been? How has your attendance at like a class been? It doesn't have to be the gym, it might be Pilates, it might be dance, it might be Zumba. Maybe you've got a bike in your house, whatever it may be. Like, how has that been? How has your nutrition been? And just be honest. There's no point in shaming yourself. There is no point in being like, oh my God, I ate like all these Maltesers last night. Like, if you had like a ton of Maltesers last night, or you're like every single day at a certain point in the day, you're eating a chocolate bar, it's like, okay, this is not something to shame myself about. I'm not lacking discipline. My body is trying to look for certain nutrients and food. So why am I having that at that point in the day? What might be going on previous in the day? I really want you to take out the idea that maybe like you're not disciplined, or you're all those different things, and just see it as like your body is incredibly intelligent and it will search for what it needs. So, for example, when you've deprived yourself of calories and nutrients, your body is going to search for what it can get, the most energy from quickly. That's why we see quite often with women where we're drinking like energy drinks, caffeine, even these matches with so much sugar syrup, so it gives the illusion that like it's super healthy for you, but actually it's not. It's like, um, this anyway, matcha and sugar syrup, and people are just having that. It's going to spike your sugar, and I'm not going to get into all the nuances of it right now, but just paying attention to all of that, your caffeine intake, and asking yourself, like, okay, where could I just actually be 1% better for my body tomorrow? And again, thinking all the way back to that thing that I said at the start, if you were a 3-year old, 4-year old, 5-year old, would you be feeding yourself in the way that you're feeding yourself currently? Like, if that was your child, what would you be doing differently? Obviously, your child's not going to have caffeine. I don't think that caffeine is an absolute no go, but I do think that you need to be mindful of your consumption of it. I am going to do another video about more specific things such as bloating, pain, various different symptoms that can come up. If it's something that you want to explore further, like I said, I'm not a nutritionist. I would advise, once you have nailed your foundations and you're like, you know what, I'm solid in these foundations, and you have been for 8 to 12 weeks, and you're still experiencing like major symptoms, I would consider getting your bloods done and going through an analysis, and maybe going to speak to somebody who is a little bit more specialized, or doing some research around particular things that are coming up. But at least you know that your foundations are solid before you start evolving and moving more into that. Because imagine if what you're experiencing was just because actually you were living off sugar and caffeine, and when you started to adapt and change that, so much more started to become better. So this is something that I found in my personal journey, where so many symptoms improved, but then there may have been some other things where I was like, actually, that is still going on. So what could be the deeper reason for that? I'm absolutely not saying that if you do these things, every single symptom that you've got will go away. You will heal every single thing in your body. What I am saying is that you're going to give yourself a strong foundation and a strong starting point to then begin to evolve upon, instead of entering it in a way of like, okay, I'm functioning on no sleep, uh, over exercising or not exercising enough, sugar and caffeine, and then now I've been put on the pill to balance my hormones, you know. So I just want to give you the best fighting chance to support and look after your body, to then dig deeper into some of the experiences you may be having, the more nuanced and more individualized things that are going on for you. I will see you in the next video.